Well, good morning, church. How you doing today? You excited to be here? I am excited to be here. My kids are excited to be here. In fact, this morning, or actually last night, my kids were like, we want to go to church early with you. I have an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old. And I'm not like super like pumped at 6 a.m. to get little kids dressed. You know what I'm saying? So they're like, we want to go with you, we want to go with you. I'm like, okay, here's the one rule. You set your alarm and you get yourself ready. And I was like, that's it. I don't want to do, you hop in the car when I hop in the car. That's about it. That's all I'm going to do for you, okay? I will drive. And they're like, okay, done. And I'm telling you, I was like going to brush my teeth and I turn around and there's 2 little girls. Hey, Dad. Ready to roll this morning. I was like, what time did you wake up? 8 minutes ago. No joke. Hair brushed, shoes on, fully dressed, ready to rock and roll because they were ready for church today. How about you, man? You ready for church today? Jeez, I'm like, my 8 and 10-year-old are beating me. I'm like, hang on, let me brush my teeth real quick. You know, like do one of those. It reminds me, we're doing a series starting August 13th. It's called Family 30. It's your best family in 30 days. Your best family in 30 days. I feel like I'm kind of on an infomercial right now. Like, hey, guaranteed for the low price of $9.99, we can get this to you. But it's true. Like I want to take 30 days, and I want to run through the family with you. I want to answer questions about relationships and parenting and financing and stewarding, all these things that God has given us. How do we do that? So your best family in 30 days, we're going to go through that message series together. Starts August 13th, and August 13th is a special day. It is the last day before kids go back to school, parents. You are the fun service. First service was like, oh yes, that's wonderful. Thank you very much. Like, y'all need your coffee, okay? I'm glad that you guys are awake because this is a lot more fun when you talk back to me. Like when you're nice and you talk back to me, that kind of thing, you know? But it's true. It's a last day before school goes back. We're kicking off the Family 30 series. It is our best Sunday ever, and it is Superhero Sunday in the kids department. Isn't that awesome? I love having a church where my kids love to get up, love to go into the kids' ministries, and love to learn about Jesus because they've made it such a fun environment. And Superhero Sunday, we're going to have little superheroes running all over the place. It's going to be incredible. Incredible. So today, if you see a person in a red kids shirt, make sure you walk up to them and give them a hug, okay? Because they're doing an awesome job telling them God is using you to do great things in our next generation, all right? Is that cool? Awesome. Also, this Wednesday is First Wednesday service. We do it once a month on the first Wednesday. That's what we call it. First Wednesday. It's at 7 o'clock. In full service, we do everything. Kids ministries, we do greeting. We have coffee ready to go. We'll do extended worship, a little bit longer worship, and we do communion on First Wednesdays. For those of you who have been wondering, hey, when does this church ever take communion? We do it every month on First Wednesday, and so we do it right then, right there. And I am telling you, God's put something on my heart that I think if we talk about it, and we have in the message, if we talk about it and we really apply it to our lives, it's not going to just change us, it's going to change the city of Sarasota. So so that's kind of the teaser for this Wednesday. You guys ready for this? Awesome. That is 7 o'clock this Wednesday, August 2nd. So it's going to be a very, very good night for us. All right, so Joshua, we've been in this series. This is the 3rd week of the series. We've got one more. This Joshua has been a pretty cool story so far. Joshua was in a pretty high-pressure situation. He was the leader of the nation of Israel. I don't know about you, but being the leader of a nation seems like a high-pressure job. Like if you mess this up, there are millions of people under you that are going to go, well, that guy was terrible, right? Like it's high pressure. But not only that, it is the only nation that God says, this is my chosen people. This is my pride, my possession, my people. And so when you screw up a normal nation, it's like bad. But when you screw up the only nation that God goes, this is my people, now that's pressure, right? So there's pressure on Joshua. And on top of that, add to that, the only other leader before you is one of the greatest leaders in all of human history. His name is Moses. You ever hear him? Yeah, he's still famous, right? And that's the guy that goes right before him. So Joshua has some big shoes to fill and a very big job. And he is leader of this nation, Israel. Up to this point, they've only known Moses. And Moses, man, this was one awesome dude. He went and stood in Pharaoh's midst and said, let my people go, because the Israelites were slaves to the Egyptians, the most powerful nation on the planet. He said, let my people go, and Pharaoh said no. And so miracles happened, and the plagues plagued the Egyptians, but not the Israelites. And Pharaoh said, finally, go, go, go. The Red Sea splits, and they walk through on dry ground. And they're wandering in the wilderness, and God provides food from heaven and water flowing from a rock so they can be provided for. And when Moses dies, God turns to Joshua and says, you're next in line. Lead these people. Oh my gosh, talk about pressure, right? That's why we have this tagline, Courage Unleashed, because we need it. Ooh, look at that, the verse. You can go back. I don't need that yet. Thank you. I pointed at the screen, and they're like, go? Yeah, go. All right, sorry. Courage Unleashed. He needed it. Do you need that too? Courage Unleashed. We all need that. We all need courage in our life, and Joshua needed it. And so as the people were leaving Egypt, God promised them a promised land. And God said to Joshua, I'm challenging you to lead these people and to lead them into the promised land. And it's on the other side of the Jordan River. They had to go from the wilderness into the promised land. And God provided miracles doing that. So Joshua gets to the edge of the Jordan River. It's at flood stage. We learned about this in week number 1 of the series. The water stops flowing and the people walk across on dry ground during the flood stage, and they get into the promised land. Then week number 2, we learned about the battle at Jericho, the very first battle where the obstacle in front of them fought back. So the river didn't fight back, but Jericho did. And there was tall walls and locked gates, and they could not get in. They could not penetrate. And so God gives Joshua this plan. March around the city for 7 days. And on the 7th day, march around 7 times, then blow the horns and yell really loud, and the walls will fall down. And so they do just that. They march and they walk in faith and they learn and they grow. And the walls fall down and God brings about a great victory. Now today we're going to continue Joshua's story as he leads the people into the promised land. And we're going to go to the battle of Ai. It's a city. And they take it the same approach they took with Jericho. They send spies in. They prepare and they attack. Except for they have a different result this time. Check it out in Joshua chapter 7. Joshua sent some of his men from Jericho to spy out the town of Ai, east of Bethel, near Bethaven. When they returned, they told Joshua, there is no need for all of us to go up there. It won't take much more than 2,000 or 3,000 men to attack Ai. Since there are so few of them, don't make all of our people struggle to go up there. So he sends spies out, and their intelligence is it's not a very strong city. There's not a lot of people. It will not require our full effort to take this on. Now you can imagine being in the position that Joshua's in. He's seen the Jordan River split. He's seen the walls fall at Jericho. He knows that God has promised this land to them. He goes, okay, go ahead. This is small. This is easy. We'll just go ahead and we'll take care of this one. And the passage continues like this. So approximately 3,000 warriors were sent, but they were soundly defeated. The men of Ai chased the Israelites from the town gate as far as the quarries, and they killed about 36 who were retreating down the slope. The Israelites were paralyzed with fear at this turn of events, and their courage melted away. They were paralyzed with fear, and their courage melted away. So Joshua leads these people of Israel to victory, to victory, to victory, and then he sends a small contingent of the army to go take care of this small city, and they get soundly defeated. What should have been easy for them was actually quite hard, and I wonder if you've ever been in a position like that before, where you feel like God has been working in you, working with you, you've found victory after victory after victory, and then one day things just take a turn for the worse. You ever been there before? Now you're not as excited as before. That's funny. But we've all been there, right? We've had our good days. God told me to start this business. I started the business. It's going well. And then one day you wake up going, oh man, what's going on? What happens? Something failed, right? Or we get into a relationship and we've been doing things the right way and God's been blessing that relationship. And you wake up one day and you're like, I did not marry that person. You know what I'm saying? Right? What is it? The financial decisions. You make an investment, you buy something, you make a big decision, and you go, ooh, that was pretty good. I feel good about that. I feel like God was leading me in that. And then the next day, it breaks down. It burns down. It is broken. The stock plummets. Whatever it is, you go from victory to defeat immediately. Have you ever been there? So the question is now, what happens when you fail? Or what happens when you find failure? Because nobody was trying to fail, right? Nobody's trying to do it on purpose, but sometimes failure finds you. Or at least that's what it feels like, doesn't it? You feel like, man, if I could only get my head above water, I could really do something in this relationship, in this financial state, with my career, with my business, with my spiritual walk, with my family, with something. We feel like we stumble. What happens? How do you respond when failure finds you? Joshua responded by going to God. Now, Joshua did go to God, and he did pray to God, and he did talk to God, and those are all wonderful things, but the way he did it not so good. And I think his reaction is similar to the way many of us would react. In fact, I think probably all of us would react this way. Check this out. Joshua continues. Joshua and the elders of Israel tore their clothing in dismay. So it's a sign of being in dismay. They threw dust on their heads and they bowed face down on the ground before the ark of the Lord until evening. So they go through all of this. They hear the bad news. They're distraught. They kneel on the ground before the ark of God until evening. And then it says this, Joshua cried out, "O sovereign Lord, why did you bring us across the Jordan River if you are going to let the Amorites kill us? God, why have you brought me here if you are going to let the Amorites have the victory? God, I thought you said you would be with us going into the promised land, but I see now that you are not with us. You have left us, God, and you're going to let the Amorites have victory on us." You know what he's saying? Essentially what he's saying is, God, this is your fault. You ever prayed a prayer like that before? God, why did you do this to me? God, why did you abandon me? Why did you leave me? Why did you let this happen to me? God, I thought bad things were supposed to happen to bad people. God, why me? Why is this happening to me? And that's Joshua's prayer. He points the finger at God. Have you ever pointed the finger at God? Have you ever been mad at God before? Anybody been mad at God before? Yes. You prayed those prayers, right? And that's what Joshua does. And then he says this, and this is where we all go. When things don't go well in step 2, we try to go back to step 1 or step 0 in his case. He says this, he finishes it, "O sovereign Lord, why did you bring us across the Jordan River if you're going to let the Amorites kill us? If only we had been content to stay on the other side. If only I had never believed your promise before. If I had never dreamed a dream of a promised land that we would settle, if I had never actually followed you in the first place, if I had only been satisfied with my old life, maybe I'll just try that because I'm encountering problems in my journey." I know you've been there before. You've had that temptation before, where God is speaking to you, he's calling you to do something, and you're stepping out in faith, you experience a little bit of failure, and you go, you know what, forget it, I'm just going back to the way things used to be. This relationship, I didn't like that person anyway. I didn't like going to that church anyway. I didn't want to spend all that time reading God's word anyway, so I'm just going to go back to my old life. Joshua is saying this. He goes, why did we come here, God, if you're just going to lead us into failure? Why did we come here if you're going to let the Amorites kill us? We should have been satisfied with the old way of doing things in the desert, in the wilderness. We shouldn't have come here. And that's the prayer that he prays. Did he go to God? Yes. Did he pray? Yes. Did he do it the right way? I don't think so. And sometimes I do that. I think sometimes you do that too, don't you? But if we're going to say, God, this is your fault, we're going to call God out, better be prepared for God to call us out sometimes, right? Because if we put on our big boy pants and we said, God, this is on you, we better keep our big boy pants on and receive what God has to say back. And that's exactly what God does with Joshua. He speaks directly to Joshua, and look what he says in the next passage of Scripture. But the Lord said to Joshua, "Get up. Why are you lying on your face like this?" He'd been lying on his face before God. God, this is your fault. You left us. You abandoned us. And I know when I was a kid, if I was acting a fool, crying, laying on the ground in my room, shouting out, my dad walked in the door and he's like, "Get up." I knew it was like, oh, shnikes, right? Like, it's like, here he goes. And he convinced me that I was wrong. You know what I'm saying? Like, with his hand on my backside, one of those things. And so but that's what God's doing to Joshua. He's going, wait. Before you start talking to me like you know everything, let me tell you what you don't know. But before you speak from your perspective, let me show you another perspective on this. Because you think you know everything, but the truth is you don't. There's a piece you're missing, Joshua. So before you blame me, let me inform you. He goes on, Israel has sinned and broken my covenant. They have stolen some of the things that I commanded must be set apart for me. Well, here's what he's saying. When they came into to the promised land, the battle at Jericho, he said, this city is mine. I will make the walls fall down. I will guarantee victory, but everything in the city belongs to me. Take it to the temple. Take it to, not the temple, but the tent of meeting that they had. Take it there, and that will be God's. And every other city is yours, but the first one, it's called a first fruit. That one's mine. And that's their way, the Israelites' way of showing God that I know that you gave us victory. I know that you are the one leading us and guiding us in this. And so we will set aside the very first portion of everything and give it to you. We still do this today as Christians. when we take in any kind of income into our life, I believe that we need to give God our first fruit as a way of saying, God, you gave this all to me to begin with. I'm going to honor you by giving you my first fruit. And so that's what Joshua was called to do. That's what the people of Israel were called to do, but they didn't do it. They didn't do it. So he says, you didn't get victory in the next stage because you didn't do the first one right. You see, there's something that I commanded. And they have not only stolen them, but have lied about it and hidden the things among their own belongings. That is why the Israelites are running from their enemies in defeat. That's why. Not because I abandoned you, not because I left you, but because you abandoned me. You left me. I had a plan for you. I had a destiny for you. I had a choice before you between follow me or do it your own way, and you chose to do it your own way. It came down to one man, a man named Achan, who took something from Jericho and buried it in his tent. And I'm not going to focus too much on Achan because this is a series about Joshua. That one guy messed up pretty big, didn't he? To the point where the next battle was a defeat and 36 people lost their lives. And you go, well, that's not fair. That one guy did something wrong and the other people had to pay the price for it. You're right, it isn't fair, and it should have never happened. But the truth is, Mom, Dad, when you mess up, it's not fair that your kids have to pay the price for that. Employer, it's not fair that you make a bad decision and your employees suffer the consequences. It's not fair, but it's still true, isn't it? And that one man, Achan, messed up. And Joshua messed up because he never consulted God before he went to Ai. He never sought God on that. He just said, okay, it's just a little thing. Don't even bother God with this one. We'll just take care of it on our own. And that led to defeat. See, there's a lot of mistakes made, but there's always consequences with that, right? And here's the one thing God was trying to point out to Joshua. The one thing, and I think it's the one thing that all of us need to learn today. And here's our point for the day. It's this. Whatever you are facing, it is spiritual. Whatever you are facing, it is spiritual. Joshua was convinced that they had enough warriors. They had enough strength. They had enough power to overcome Ai. But they were not walking in the natural. In fact, God was saying, hey, listen, in the physical, you may have had enough, but you were not spiritually ready to take that on. So God was bringing to his attention that there was something missing, not in the physical. The physical was fine. They had enough warriors. They had enough talent. They had enough power, but they did not have God. Something was missing in the spiritual. And every single thing that we face in life has a spiritual piece to it that we must overcome. We must live and work in this mindset that everything we face is spiritual. Well, TJ, I'm just having a bad time with my finances right now. It's not really a spiritual thing. Well, actually, it is, because you need wisdom. You need wisdom on the decisions you make, right? What to do with this, how to write a budget, how to lead this direction. Do I take this job or that job? What do I do? That is wisdom. And wisdom's spiritual. It's not intelligence. It's not knowledge. It's wisdom. It's something totally different. And wisdom comes from God. If you want to be successful in one area, you have to be successful from a spiritual side first. What about relationships? It's not spiritual, TJ. That person's just a jerk. Right? That person's they're just not very good with people. You're right. That probably has something to do with it. But at the bulk of it, though, the bulk of it all is spiritual, because every single great relationship that I've ever witnessed has a key piece to it. It's called forgiveness. Because nobody's perfect, and that person will offend you, and you will offend them. And if you cannot walk in forgiveness towards that person, your relationship will never be right. And forgiveness, that's not natural, that's supernatural, that's spiritual. See, we can't walk in healthy relationships unless we have the spiritual side won. We can't walk in healthy relationships without forgiveness. You see, everything is spiritual. You want peace in your life, don't you? How do you find peace? Well, I got to get rid of all the chaos. So we work hard and we try to save money so that we can prevent that chaos. We try to have a reliable car, because if our car doesn't break down, there's more peace. We try to make sure we have peace with all of our relationships, that our house is good and our job is good and all of our things are good. And how many know, have you ever reached peace by making sure everything in your life is good? No, because something always goes wrong. There's always chaos. There's always something going on around you, right? Right? So peace isn't natural. You can't find it naturally. Peace is supernatural and can only be found when you are at peace with God. And it doesn't matter the chaos around you. If you have peace with God, you have peace. It's spiritual. You see, everything we face, every challenge we face is spiritual. Everything is spiritual. which means our first step should never be in the natural. Our first step should always be in the supernatural. When Joshua was facing Ai, he sends the scouts. They say it's a little city. It's not a big deal. Just send 3,000. It'll be fine. Joshua should not have sent anyone. He should have gone to God and say, what do you want us to do? Because if he would have gone to God first, he would have found out that there was something going on and that it was not time to go to Ai because they were not spiritually prepared. They were not ready. They were not in right relationship with God. They needed to fix something. But instead they found out the hard way. Starts with the spiritual. We give these bracelets out, and on your way out of here this morning, we've got baskets full of these. It says on it, pray first. Pray first. Don't pray last, pray first. Because if everything is spiritual, if everything we're facing is spiritual, should we not start with spiritual every time? Right? So when that person in your life is kind of acting a fool, should you just respond out of your gut instinct, or should you pray first before you respond? You need to pray first. Before you walk into that meeting at work, what do? You pray first. Before you do that sales pitch, you should pray first. Before you speak to your kids about anything, you should pray first. Okay, you guys get the hint, right? Always pray first. Always. And we're giving you these bands to remind you, pray first. Because the thing you are facing the most is not in the natural, but in the supernatural. There is a spiritual element to everything we do. And if we win the battle in the spiritual, it's much easier to win the battle in the physical. And that is what Joshua is learning. He said, God, this is all your fault. And God goes, actually, you didn't win the battle in the spiritual side. You were actually failing there. That's why you failed in the physical side. Guys, I'm telling you right now, if we would win the war in the spiritual side, in our relationship with God and growing with Him, we'd find a lot more physical victory in our life too. That's why we have 21 days of prayer. Starts tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. Oh, TJ, that's kind of early. That's physically early. You're right, but if you're ever going to win the war in the physical, you got to win the war in the spiritual. From 7 to 8, Monday through Friday, we're praying in here. And then Saturday night, 7 to 8 p.m., we do that year-round. We do that every single Saturday. We pray. We're going to do that 21 days. Sunday mornings, we'll have church services. We'll pray together here. But then Monday through Friday, in the morning, Saturday night, we're going to pray. Because I believe that in the next couple of months, our church is going to see something incredible happen. We're going to see people walk through the doors of our church that do not know God, and they're going to find God when they walk through the doors of the church, and they're going to find freedom in Him like they've never experienced before. And it's not going to happen if we just hope it happens. It's going to happen if we win the war in the spiritual, and that this promised land of Sarasota and the west coast of Florida will become our promised land if we prepare ourselves spiritually to take on those spiritual battles that are going on in the world around us. Because there's a whole world out there that is broken and hurting and lost and far from God that needs to know the message of His healing and His hope and His freedom and forgiveness. And we are the people to deliver that, but we cannot just go out blindly. We need to win the war in the spiritual to do that. So we're praying for 21 days. We do it again in January. And next August, going to do it again. Next January, going to do it again. We've done it every single year since our church has been in existence. And every single year, we've seen people walk through the doors of our church, experience Jesus, and find freedom in Him. And I'm not going to stop now, because if we don't win the war in the spiritual, we will not win the war anywhere else. The same is true with you as an individual. If you do not win the war in the spiritual, we cannot win the war anywhere else. Because God has something planned for you. But we don't want to leave Him in the process. We want to follow Him through the process. And that's what Joshua learned. Everything is spiritual. Check this out. God continues to speak to Joshua. He says this, get up. He says it again. So Joshua clearly did not get up. He's going, I'm so sorry, God, right? At least he's on the knee. And God goes, no, for real, get up this time. Get up, get up, get up, get up. Command the people to purify themselves. So get right with me. Make sure that they're purified themselves in participation for tomorrow. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Hidden among you, O Israel, are things set apart for the Lord. And then look at this. This sentence is so key. If we could just grasp this. You will never defeat your enemies until you remove these things from among you. You will never defeat your enemies. You'll never get the promised land. You'll never conquer the city of Ai until you deal with the spiritual side. Until you work through that side. Until you work in the supernatural, the natural will not happen. You got to work in that side. And that's what God is telling Joshua. Later on, after quite some time, the Israelites do overtake the entire promised land. And there's a king named Solomon. He writes a book named Proverbs. And he talks about this in Proverbs chapter 16. He says we can make our own plans, but the Lord gives the right answer. What did Joshua do? He made his own plans. Ai, not a big city, send 3,000 warriors, it should be fine. Seems logical enough, right? Hey, we make our own plans. I go, well, I'll do this or I'll do that. I'll go here or I'll do this thing. But if I don't consult God, I don't have the right answer. I have my answer. It's God's answer that's right, though. The book of Proverbs is Solomon is telling us, hey, we have our own plans and they seem logical enough to us, but sometimes God is bigger than our logic. In fact, every time, God is bigger than what we think or our logic is. And so he says, but God has the right answer. People may be pure in their own eyes, but the Lord examines their motives. And then I love this. Commit your actions to the Lord and your plans will succeed. Commit your actions to the Lord and your plans will succeed. What did Joshua not do? He did not commit his actions to the Lord. He did not consult God. He did not pray first. And his plans did not succeed. Had he gone to God first, what would have happened? God would have said, actually, it's not time to attack Ai. Actually, here's what you need to do. And he would walk him through the journey of what he needed to do, what he needed to change, so that he would be spiritually ready to take on the next battle in his life. Listen, there's something before you. There's some battle, some relationship, some financial thing, some health thing, something that you need to be ready for. Go to God before you start that battle. Prepare yourself spiritually before you go to the natural. Does that make sense? Pray first. We've set aside 21 days to do that, to make sure that we are ready as a church, as a staff, as individuals, to make sure that we're ready for what's happening next in our season of our church and a season as individuals. And I'm encouraging you to do the same. The good news is with Joshua is, even though he messed up, God wasn't done with him. And this message is not to make you feel bad that, hey, you left God, you need to get right with God. That's not it. The highlight out of all of this is that when Joshua walked away from God, God said, hey, this is what you need to do. And he came back and God says, with arms wide open, says, hey man, I want to use you still. Check it out. The passage continues in chapter 8, verse 1. The Lord said to Joshua, do not be afraid or discouraged. I know a lot of people that are discouraged because they feel like they can never measure up. They can never live up. But God specifically says to Joshua, and I think he specifically says to you, don't be afraid. Don't be discouraged. I know it's not been perfect in the past, but God's not done with you. He's not done with you. There's still future ahead of you. God's not done. Don't be discouraged. Take all your fighting men, all, not some, not part, all of your fighting men, and attack Ai. For I have given you the king of Ai, his people, and his town, and his land. You will destroy them as you destroyed Jericho and its king. But this time, you may keep the plunder and the livestock for yourself. So there's this victory that God has promised. Jericho, that's God's. That's a first fruit. This one's for you. And now that you're right with me, man, I want to see you blessed. That's what God says. Don't be afraid. Don't be discouraged. This is for you. Now, all of us today have a spiritual next step. All of us have something that we need to do. And for each one of us, it's going to be different. Because all of us are at different walks in our journey spiritually. Some of us don't know God, and we need to start, our spiritual step is to start a relationship with God, right? And that's called surrendering your life to Him. Some of us have followed God for a little while, but there's a battle in front of you that you need to spiritually prepare for, which means you need to pray first. You need to go and start that relationship with Him. You need to grow it. You need to ask Him, God, what do I do? Do I go left? Do I go right? Do I say yes? Do I say no? Do I propose? Do I not propose, right? Like, do you got to ask these questions? You have to ask God, which way do I go? And that's where many of you are. And so in a moment, we're going to pray a prayer, and it's so simple. It's so simple. It just says, God, the first point is, my spiritual decision today is to surrender my life to you. I've been doing it out of my own logic. I've looked at AI and go, I can handle this. And we found out that failure is an option. And that apart from God, things haven't worked. And I want to change that, which means, God, I want to consult you. I want to give my life to you. The Bible calls that salvation. If that's you this morning, we're going to pray that prayer in just a moment. And the second part of that prayer is, God, I do believe in you. I do follow you. But man, I feel like you and I aren't close. And if there's something there that needs to be changed, that there's a spiritual thing that needs to happen, God, I want to work on that. And I want to work on that with you. I want you to speak to me, and I want to respond, and I say yes. To whatever you tell me to do, God, I say yes. That's the second part of this prayer. If you want to pray that with me, here's what we're going to do. Nobody moving around, just quiet for a little bit so that you can talk with God. Maybe you want to even close your eyes and bow your heads just so there's no distractions. So, because we get distracted sometimes. And I want you to focus in, not on my voice, but on what God is saying to you. Have a moment where you can say, God, I'm yours. I want you to speak to me. And I'm going to pray a prayer. And it's not my words that matter, but it's your heart connecting with him. That's what really matters. You can pray this prayer with me. Everyone praying it right where you are. So no one's praying alone. We say, God, this morning I pray that you would forgive me. That you would give me grace, God. I surrender everything I am to you. I've lived my life my way, and it hasn't led me to the place I want to go. So today, I surrender everything I am to you. Thank you for sending your son Jesus to die for me, to give me that forgiveness. And as I move forward, Lord, I continually, God, I want to pray first. I want to know your will. I want to go to you first in everything. So today, the decision, the battle before me, I want to win the war in the spiritual before I go to the natural. So today, God, I give everything I am to you. Every decision I submit to you. Not my will, but yours, God. Thank you, Jesus. In your name we pray. And everybody says, amen. Why don't you put your hands together for the people that just prayed that prayer.